For those of you just joining, I'm Marilyn Zakauer, founder and CEO of Cosmic Centaurs. I'll be with you for the next 2 hours, broadcasting live from Dubai. Global Marketing Day is brought to you by Semrush, and today we've been having discussions on new technologies, digital marketing, and SEO, and we have so much more to come. If you have any questions for our speakers and guests, post on our ongoing thread on globalmarketingday.com. Next up is Bader Kalooti, Head of Growth and Operations for MENA at Binance. Bader is a former investment banker turned award-winning entrepreneur, founding the innovative dry cleaning business MyBox. Today, he helps companies achieve strong growth momentum and increase signups by developing new strategic partnerships and licensing. We'll continue the conversation after Bader's presentation with our guest experts, Haris Mumtaz, Strategy Marketing Leader at Huawei Consumer Business Group, and Ahmed Khalifa, CEO and founder of Social Month. Ready to dive in? It's time to get started with Bader's presentation.
Thank you very much for having me. So today I'd like to talk about best practices for community engagement. And since Binance's inception in 2017, we've always adopted a community-centric approach to help drive our growth. And today, this grassroots mindset is embedded in our DNA, and we definitely go out of our way to show our appreciation and commitment to the community in order to continue our growth and engagement with them. So when it comes to community engagement, it's a pretty wide term, right? There's a lot you can do. And if you want to dive into some of the best practices today, I've selected a few of the ones that I think are the most important to achieve that goal. First and foremost, you have to understand your community. And that means having a local focus and understanding really the different nuances for each market that you serve. MENA, for example, is very dynamic. We operate in 20 different markets. And so for us, we really need to pay attention to the culture, the different needs of people in the different communities, and try to have an on-the-ground presence as much as possible to be present, to be very responsive, and to quite frankly understand those needs and how to kind of serve the community the best way possible. The second is to provide a sense of purpose. And I think for us also that's very important because we want to make sure that our community feels empowered, that they are part of this very fascinating movement that's happening with Web3, right? So for us, there's a lot of passion there, right? And so we want to nurture that passion, fuel it, and coordinate it in a sense to achieve that goal. The third is continuous engagement. It's honestly a 24/7 job, right? It doesn't stop, and you have to invest in the resources and the right tools to see it through and to make sure that you are responding online, you're responding offline. There are a lot of questions and a lot of opportunity for you to kind of give back to the customer, give back to the community, give back to the users if you want to retain that user focus, which Binance has as its North Star. Next, we will look at content, and we all know content is king, right? So in Web3 today, there is no shortage of content, right? It's about picking the relevant content, useful content, and content that's engaging and educational, because for us, we prioritize safety and trust, and we want to be transparent and lead the way with transparency in the industries. For us, we definitely make sure that we're always talking about what Binance is doing, the problems that we're facing, and being fully transparent with the community. So for us, that's top priority. Also, this is not just an opportunity to speak to the community, it's also an opportunity to listen, right? So when we have our community engagements, it's where the feedback loop comes full circle. Because obviously, again, going back to the user focus mentality, it's always important for us to continue to listen to our users, to listen to our customers, stakeholders, partners, to keep improving on our product and our offering. This goes without saying, but even with something like community engagement, you do have to have a data-driven approach. You need to measure the success of your campaigns so you can better optimize your engagements going forward. And we look at things from like NPS scores, sentiment scores, reach, engagement levels. It's very important to kind of digest every single engagement that you do with a data hat on and use it to improve going forward. And then finally, we definitely encourage multi-channel engagement. It can't be monotone. There's so many ways to reach and engage with the community. I've shortlisted 4, which we'll double click on now on the next slides. In my view, the most important one is Academy. And the reason is, in any new industry, in order to cross that chasm from early adopters to the mainstream, you have to educate people in the community of why this technology has value, how to use it, and also to demystify a lot of the misconceptions that are out there, right? So Binance Academy was founded in 2018 with that sole objective. And what we do is we've published over 400 educational articles in 25 different languages, because we have a global business with a global perspective here to drive education on Web3. And we also have created different crash courses that any user, or not even a user, anybody can go online and kind of engage with to learn about Web3 as a beginner. And we have also more advanced courses for those who are more technical. And we also spend a lot of time working with universities to create workshops, to create programs that help to spread the education of Web3. Next is social media. Obviously, you can't be a business today without having social media presence, and we adopt an omnipresent approach to social media. So we have different channels for different use cases, right? You have your crypto natives, and for that, for example, we use Discord, Telegram, Twitter to some extent, and then you have to speak to mainstream audience. And with that, we leverage Facebook, we have Instagram coming soon, YouTube, Binance Live, which is a similar version of YouTube that we use in-house for large gatherings and large audiences online. And you have to come up with the right use case per channel, right? Because every channel has a different audience, a different tone, and a different objective. And so you have to be tactical with how you execute your social media strategy to reach out to the community. Lastly, content is king, as discussed earlier. So we have 3 or 4 main content pillars that we try to abide by. One is obviously talking about the industry news, Binance offerings and products. As I mentioned, Academy is in that bucket. Then we also have obviously key calendar occasions that we want to talk about that's relevant to the community. We do a lot of competitions and giveaways to drive engagement and get people involved. And then we have AMA sessions, which is something that people love because they get to talk to industry leaders and ask questions in a live format, and again, helps to drive transparency and trust. Meetups and events, we also spend a lot of time and effort there because that's the opportunity for us to connect on the ground physically with the community. And so we try to do an event or a meetup in all the markets that we operate when possible. And we have different formats. The first is what we call a meetup, and this is where we technically invite members of our community to come. We have contests, we have sessions where we pick a topic and discuss it together. We have celebrity speakers, industry experts, people from Binance, again, engaging with the community on a hands-on basis. And this is not just typically, it can also happen offline. For some situations where we can't be on the ground, you have the option of doing it online as well. And then your audience is quite diverse. We look at retail, we look at government, corporates, VIPs, channel partners. It's a wide set of people that we look to engage with. And then you have sponsored events, right? So we look at selective opportunities where we feel fits our narrative and fits the Web3 movement. So things like Future Blockchain Summit, Seamless, the IFC FinTech Week. There's no shortage of good events in MENA to be a part of and sponsor. And then lastly, our own hosted events, right? So we've done things like, women in crypto, because we feel like, that is a segment of the population that we want to make sure are catching up in terms of awareness and penetration. So for us, it's super important to engage with women and bring them into the Web3 movement. We also hosted the Binance Blockchain Week in Dubai last year, which was super popular. So yeah, it's a multifaceted approach, and we definitely rely on this channel to kind of, as I said, engage with customers and the community on the ground. Lastly, we have the Binance Angel program, and this is something that really is unique to Binance. It's where we kind of invite people who are passionate volunteers to come and support the Binance community and take care of executing events, responding to community on various social media platforms. It's basically a labor of love for these people. They just, obviously are very enthusiastic about Web3, and they want to volunteer to support Binance achieve those objectives, right? So, they provide feedback on product, assisting in online, offline events, as I mentioned, and really hand-holding the community when we need them, especially if there are markets where we're not physically present on the ground. The angels step up and provide that, fill that gap for us. Yeah. So I think that concludes our session.
Oh, that was really incredible. I think, With digital, the pandemic didn't help. We've really forgotten the art of community engagement in many ways. And recently in the Web3 space, we've seen some launches from some very big brands actually flop because they hadn't taken the time to develop community first, even if they had a big global brand. And I think communities are incredibly resilient when you're able to develop them. Maybe I'll start with Ahmed. You've built many different startups in your career. That meant you've probably built and engaged with many different communities. What have you seen across the board in good practices or fundamentals of how you build communities?
Like the most important in building a community is content. As Badr mentioned before, content is king. So what we do in we are establishing any brand is awareness and the content about the niche that you are starting in. For example, if you are starting in banking, you can give some tips about banking. In crypto and the trading industry, you can talk about like which things that you should avoid, which things that you should go for. Like content is very important when you are starting any company. At the moment, content can make you sell, can make you do anything even without paid campaigns. So we built a brand which made above $2 million in 6 months just from content organic reach without even doing anything else. Content, but content, you are doing the right strategy, you are posting on time, you have the quality of the things that you are talking about, and you are consistent. Consistency is the most important in content. So if you are not consistent, you will not succeed, even if you have a quality content.
Yeah, absolutely. I think in community building, also giving before you take is so important. Content is one form of giving to your community. Maybe, Harris, within your work, how do you develop communities and what is unique in communities and how they give back and interact and kind of help the brand move forward?
I think like Ahmed and Badr, they mentioned, there are multiple, it's a multifaceted approach, yeah? But content is one of the very important pillars, and I think what really makes the difference is that they should fall in love, brand love, around your community. There is a lot of online and offline engagements that we do. But then what does a brand stand for? He mentioned a very good point, actually, the academy side of things, where you educate them. So your brand means an institution where they can trust for their academic or education needs, where you demystify, where you educate them, where you literally handhold them, Plus, you have the right content strategy in place, which is basically, timely in terms of diversification. It covers, a wider scope, a wider range of audiences. And I think by the end of it all, what really matters is that how you position yourself as a brand to your community, because everything you do tells them what you stand for. It has to be more strategic than just having a good small event or just inviting 500 people or 5,000 people for that matter, yeah? It has to make sense and they should relate with it. I think put together all of these three and you can actually leverage your community engagement to be developed into brand love, which is long lasting, Yeah. And at times it's good to have 100, angels than to have 5,000, people who don't care, you know what I mean? Part of your engaged audience. So that's my 2 cents.
Absolutely. I believe it's in Y Combinator that they say like it's better that you find the people who love your product than the people who just like it, right? And then you can grow from there and reach your tipping point. You have a very multi-pronged approach to community development. You've told us a little bit about like your channels, online versus offline, engaging the angels. How do you make sure that the conversation stays on theme, that the right things are being discussed within the community? Because communities also have a life of their own.
Yeah, I think it's a combination of having a plan, but also reacting to the fast pace of the industry and what's relevant today and what the community is interested in, right? So for us, we create our content calendars across different channels I discussed. We have, the wants of what we want to deliver in terms of academic content that we feel is important for the community to know, anything about Binance's upcoming product launches to make sure that people are aware of what's coming and how they can better use our service. But then at the same time, you have to always be ready for the ad hoc stuff, right? The stuff that pops up, on a daily basis that you need to make sure, like I mentioned earlier, demystifying some of the concerns or talking about the hard facts and owning up to some of the mistakes being done, because again, this is a nascent industry, it's growing, Binance is at the forefront and we want to do it the right way. And that means when something goes wrong, you need to acknowledge it, learn from it and talk about it, right? So transparency again for us is super important. And for us, I mean, to answer your question, having a bit of that control and plan, but also being responsive to the times and to the changes that are happening is part of the strategy as well.
Yeah, I think that's a really beautiful point. We have a question here from the audience as well. You're talking about responding to context, right? And part of that is responding, and you mentioned that in the beginning of your presentation, to the local preferences and different ways of engaging. Maybe a question for you, Harris, here from the audience is, what do you think are key differences, for example, when you engage communities in the MENA or versus Asia or versus Europe? Do you see that you have to engage with these audiences very differently?
I think yes and no. Why? Because you definitely take into consideration the demographics, psychographic, the culture. You need to be sensitive towards a specific set of group of people, whether they are a country, nation, and so on and so forth. Irrespective of what you reach out to them with. So that is pretty much there. But underlying fundamentals for you to reach out to your community and how you engage with them, it's like having an element of permanence and change. You adapt, but then you don't change from being who you actually are, or who you want to be, basically what you want to stand for. So I think there has to be an overarching fundamental pillars that give you the girder, that give you the foundation of how you are going to represent yourself as a brand and stand tall with your community. Yeah. But then there has to be certain elements that we need to take into consideration when we are targeting audiences in MENA, Europe, APAC, and the rest of the world. So I think there has to be that touch of localization. And I think if I were to add and conclude, I think, like I said earlier, it is very imperative for, irrespective of who you target, who you reach out to, but they should very clearly understand what you stand for as a brand. If you can get this message across, I mean, everything else becomes a tool. The message has the most power, the content has the most power. You know what I mean?
I appreciate that, absolutely. I think there has to be some constants, the purpose and what you stand for as brand and what conversations you want to lead. And as a company, we do a lot of community building, but we only really realized that we only started calling it a community when we did our first in-person event in Dubai. After 2 years of being in existence, suddenly everybody was in the room and we're like, oh, we have a community. Ahmed, I'd love to get your perspective. I don't know if it's special to this part of the world or not, but that aspect of doing both the in-person and the digital side of community building.
Like, in person is very important, but you have to be selective. You have like to post on social media, for example. We are choosing some community, and we are like selective in choosing this community. Because when you are selective, you get the right people, the right audience. After that, they understand what is your message. But if you get random people, they will never understand what you're talking about, and you're wasting your time.
Yeah.
So it's very important when you have a community for people which understand you, understand what you are standing for, understand your purpose, your goals, and everything you're talking about. And it's very important to engage with people on live. That's what I advise all of my clients and my customers. I say that you have to talk weekly, well, at least just go one time live on all platforms and talk about anything related to the audience, the questions, answering the questions, maybe let's say like the frequent questions they are asking for, open like for comments and see what they are engaging you with. After that, you will understand your audience and what they are attracting to.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. Badr, we have a question here from the audience about how Binance builds trust specifically and credibility within the community.
Yeah, good question. I think, like I said, that's our North Star, right? For us, trust is key, especially during the turbulent times that the industry is facing now. And so for us, it's about, one, being transparent, being reachable, being out there, doing these community engagements, facing the community with the hard questions, and taking the lead in kind of setting the new standard of how the industry should operate. We've done things like proof of reserves, so many things that are new to the industry but are required in order for it to kind of take it to the next step, right? And to kind of make Web3 become mainstream, because it's truly built on the back of very disruptive technology, and we're seeing more and more use cases come to life. And so for us, we want to shed light on these use cases. We want to lead the way in terms of transparency, communication, and doing more of these community engagements so that people know, hey, this is a brand that I can trust.
Yeah, I think in a volatile industry, of course, like the crypto space, maybe community brings resilience.
Absolutely. They're the most loyal.
Yeah.
Right? They're
So
the most
do
loyal.
you have stories or examples of maybe, and we know in the past few years there's been very tough moments for this industry of how the community came together?
So many. I think one to choose from was, I would say, well, at least my favorite was when we did the Burj Khalifa light show. It was honestly overwhelming to see the number of people who came to the fountain area to kind of celebrate that moment, because Dubai is, and UAE and other areas in the GCC are leading the way when it comes to regulating this industry, which I believe is a fundamental pillar to take this to the next level, right? And so this is the path that Binance has decided to move towards, and rightfully so, because now it's time for us to kind of work with regulators to kind of set the right foundations for this industry and for it to thrive. And so kind of that moment we chose to celebrate our moment in Dubai with what we've achieved so far. It was great to see just the support of everybody for Binance to come and watch that show. So it was a great experience for me.
Yeah, I echo that so much. Seeing the community come together is always an emotional moment, I think. You also bring up a great point, which is that community isn't only about the end users. You're talking about regulators, you're talking about the government. Maybe Harris, tell us a little bit about how you engage stakeholders across the board. So not just the users, but anybody else that needs to be a member of this community for it to really thrive.
I think that's a very, very important question, because at times we are too bogged down with, engaging our end users, because they are the, source of brand love, source of engagement, source of revenue, and so on and so forth, that we forget that there are a lot of different stakeholders that we need to equally engage with. And especially because I come from tech, every day is a new day. Every day there is something happening which will make something obsolete, or which will, bring to life, 5 different questions. And it is imperative that we as a brand are in constant, we are constantly engaging with our stakeholders, internal as well as external. Internal being our subsidiaries, our internal partners, our employees for that matter, equally important as our users, Externally, our vendors, our suppliers, our partners, and I think when we are creating that strategic roadmap for how we want to engage with our internal and external stakeholders, we need to make sure that it is, for as much as we can plan, it is regular. For example, like we have something in H1 every year for our external stakeholders, where we take them through what we did in Q1, what we did in, like a sit down, like a QBR, And then if you feel the need, do it on a monthly basis, Make sure that they are at par, they know exactly what we are planning to launch, what went wrong with the last product that we tried to launch, At times you have to manage, not everything is hunky-rosy, you know what I mean? You start 10 things and maybe 2 of them didn't work out. So you should be transparent. I think that is the word that we need to, use a lot. We need to be transparent, and we need to, be ready to face our internal and external stakeholders and take responsibility. I think the more, it's as simple as being a responsible brand that takes responsibility and is very transparent. If you are able to build this persona, I think a lot of your, thing is done for you, and then this will eventually result in the brand love. If you stand for something, that's how you gather the community, because I want to walk this path, and this is that, like he said, be transparent, make sure that we work with the regulators, make sure that we take responsibility, and make sure we are seen as a brand that is trying to do the right thing. And that is what matters in the short term as well as in the... It's not easy. It's not an easy path to walk. Trust you me, a lot of times you want to, twist things, you want to spin things around, and everything, in the marketing world. But I think the best simplicity is the best policy. Be open and be transparent.
Yeah, I think you make a great point also about ensuring that as a brand, you're always represented in the same way towards all of your stakeholders. Of
Exactly.
course, you'll change your tone. You won't speak to a regulator exactly the same way as you speak to an end user. You'll adapt to the channels and mediums and environments where those relationships can thrive. But
Exactly.
your messaging and your brand is always consistent across the board. Question for you, Badr. Do you see any kind of unique stories of how to engage communities here in this region? So, for example, I spent a bit of my summer in North America, and I was trying to do a bit of business development there and trying to understand, like, what's the key to unlocking a community in a different country, right? And I remember reflecting on, for example, how much in Dubai events are such a huge part of it. If you're not doing an event in Dubai, then your community doesn't exist. Do you echo that in your own experience? What other key elements of developing communities in this region would you like to share with us?
Yeah, look, I think, it's definitely not a broad brush approach, right? Every community has its, as I mentioned earlier, its nuances and different ways in terms of how you can foster and kind of nurture that community. So Dubai events is obviously one of the go-to, right, for any industry, because it's just such a vibrant place, and the infrastructure is conducive to hosting big events and having these entertaining outcomes for the community. But I think if you want to look at the common denominator across MENA, I would have to say it's the academy and the online meetups that we do, because it's the most effective, efficient way to get to a mass audience, relatively low friction, right? And you can put some great content out there. Audiences have the opportunity to engage, similar to this setup right here, and so that's always great and fun for them. So I think that would be the one we lean on the most.
Absolutely.
Just in terms of impact.
Marilyn, if you allow me, I have a question for my.
Please, I love
fellow,
that.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, see, I think we touched upon a lot of very very important strategic issues here. One challenge that we all have faced is basically how to, number one, and this is my question to both of you. Maybe I can learn a thing or two. How do we gauge the efficiency of the activities that we are doing? In terms of community engagement, And to second that, because there is always a churn, no matter how good your community engagement strategy is, there will always be a churn by the end of the day. So efficacy and churn, how do we gauge it? How do we minimize it?
20-second answer.
Okay, so like in community, for example, in Dubai, like we are like choosing the people by like, for example, let's say we have like a campaign on social media. We will choose certain people if they will do certain activities. Okay, for example, we will choose the most engaged like group, and we will make an event for them. We will make the like let's say the one who made the most likes for our posts. This is like posting the engagement very high. So this is very, very important.
Love that.
So I go back to data. For efficiency, we look at basically how much effort, time, money did you spend, and what did you get out of it, right? What was the reach? Were people happy? Were people satisfied? When it comes to minimizing churn, obviously it's great to hear back and do surveys to understand what went well, what didn't do well, what could we do better next time, so we can bring them back in or learn from our mistakes going forward. I think that's a quick answer to your question.
Beautiful, thank you. I love that insight also of that layered community. You have your angels, there are your core believers, you were talking about that, and then maybe you can kind of understand different levels of the community and then progressively engage with them in that way.
Yeah, I just want to say one thing, because your question was spot on. People usually have this misconception. Community is not a customer. It's a broad umbrella. It's like you said, stakeholders, detractors, supporters, loyalists, customers. It's a big group of people.
Yeah, even engaging with your haters is part of engaging
Absolutely,
with the community.
that's part of the community. Absolutely,
The most important part of the community.
Because when you start winning them over, you're doing
Then
something
you've
good.
won. Yeah, I love that. Thank you so much. Thank you to our speaker and guests, Badr Kalooti, Head of Growth and Operations for MENA at Binance, Haris Mumtaz, Strategic Marketing Leader at Huawei Consumer Business Group, and Ahmed Khalifa, CEO and founder of Social Month. We truly appreciate all of you sharing incredible insights on how brands can generate and sustain engagement through community building. To our audience, if you're on social media, please share your favorite tips from this session. I have so many takeaways from today's session using the hashtag Global Marketing Day, and we'll see you for our next session.